Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. This is Scott Reisch of Crime Talk. Thank you for tuning in today. Obviously, there's a lot of Crime Talk news as it relates to Jeffrey Epstein, who was found dead in his cell at 6:30 this morning in his Manhattan jail cell, awaiting federal charges of child human trafficking and sexual exploitation of children. So who would have expected that when we said that we were going to go live today at 11 o'clock? It certainly was not me, but Mr. Epstein certainly has a way of making his appearance, so to speak, and gives us a lot to talk about. So, obviously, Jeffrey Epstein. Who here, let me see, show your hands. Who thought Jeffrey Epstein would not make it to trial? Yep, that's me. I just had a feeling, he had attempted suicide a couple of weeks ago. It just came out right before we came on. Attorney General Barr said that he was appalled that Jeffrey Epstein was able to commit suicide, which raises a lot of questions as to who the hell was watching him. Because right now, obviously he was under suicide watch. He had been taken to the hospital last week, apparently returned, said, okay, you're good to go. And apparently the cameras that were watching him happened to have a malfunction just at that appropriate time when he was committing suicide. And I believe I read something this morning that he had hung himself, and that's how he had committed suicide. And so, most people have never been to a prison, and that's a good thing. But if you go into a prison, and I've gone to prisons to see clients. I've gone in there to see crime scenes. And although the prison officials, whether it's by design or not, usually try to cover just about every space with video cameras these days, there's always a little dead zone. And there's always a little spot that just doesn't capture much. And prisoners always seem to know how that works. And I think most people, once again, who've never been to a prison or have never talked to clients that have been into prison, it is amazing the things that they can do and how that information can be passed when one is in custody. I had a client once who was at what we called Colorado State Penitentiary. It was the equivalent of the state version of Supermax here in Colorado. And what he would explain would be how that they would send notes to other people on different floors via the toilet system. They would be able to flush it and act like, those little things that go, at the bank, they would shoot them up. They would be able to communicate that way. They'd be able to slide notes back and forth. It is, when you have someone that's there for the rest of their life in perpetual lockdown, so to speak, they have a lot of time to think, and they have a lot of trial and error moments to get that done. So it's very, very interesting, I think, the timing. Did Jeffrey Epstein really want to kill himself? Was that because he thought the case was so bad, so overwhelming against him, and maybe he had come to the realization that he was in a moment where he knew he was probably never getting out of prison? This was, in fact, his destiny, where he was going to go, and he just figured, the hell with it, I'm out of here. It's interesting, and seriously, I am not some sort of conspiracy person, but just the day before, some 2,000 pages of documents were released, whereby some pretty significant names were on this list, where it was alleged that Jeffrey Epstein had arranged for, coordinated, or ordered his little sex slaves to have sex with various people. One of them was the name that came up, and he's obviously put out a statement saying that he denied any contact or any inappropriate sexual contact with anyone, including minor children related to Mr. Epstein, and obviously distanced themselves. But one was former Senator Gregory Mitchell. The other was the former New Mexico governor, Bill Richardson. And, these people were very high in the political structure. He was a UN ambassador. He was a former governor of New Mexico. I mean, huge names where people, associated with it. I mean, let's face it. If you're someone that's in politics like that, yes, this guy is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but why are you hanging out with him if he could potentially tarnish your reputation? Or maybe ever just figured, hey, he's hanging out with all these people, they're hanging out with him, and oh, by the way, he's raising hundreds of millions of dollars for candidates and things of that nature, that it's okay. It'll be interesting to see if we actually ever get to see the results of the investigation as to who was watching him, Jeffrey Epstein, who was monitoring the cameras. Was there anyone else in the cell with him? Was there anyone else on the floor who had access to his cell? How did he do it? It's not impossible, for people to commit suicide in prison. It's done all the time, whether people save medications from other people, whether, they hang themselves with their bed sheet. It doesn't take that much to do it if one needs to do it. And there's always somebody there that'll offer advice on how to do it as well. So Jeffrey Epstein, did he escape justice? Great. Let's see here. Delusional lucidity. Major, how are you? Great to see you. This is for your plane maintenance fund. I appreciate that. Delusional lucidity. It's not to digress too much, because we are talking about the Jeffrey Epstein and why he is on suicide watch. But this has been the worst year for CrimeTalk 1 that I can imagine in years. Last year I flew some 125 hours, and this year it's literally about 3 in my own plane. And I know that's like, it's not, I'm not complaining. Those are inconveniences. They're good problems to have, but every time I turn around, something has broken. And in fact, I thought I was going to be able to fly it to the conference that I was going to last week, which is why we didn't put out any content last week, was I was just simply too busy to do that. But it was a situation where I went out there Monday, and there's a big puddle of hydraulic fluid under the plane. They thought they were going to be able to fix it before I left. They did not. And then, so I got a call Thursday from my landlord of my hangar, and all of a sudden he said that there was another puddle of hydraulic fluid, even though it had supposedly been fixed, it had been flown, and it was good and ready to go. And there you have it. So CrimeTalk 1 will be up and running, and we'll start getting back out on the road via me flying myself. So, all right, let's go back here to some of the comments that I see coming by as it relates to that. Sheena Evans, so wanted to see him testify. Let's talk about if Epstein, obviously there's not going to be a trial. The question now becomes, are there going to be any other charges filed against anyone based upon the information that has been learned in the Jeffrey Epstein case at this point? That is going to be huge. Now, obviously, the people that were involved in the Florida case where Jeffrey Epstein pled guilty to the prostitution charges, which required him to register as a sex offender. But for lack of a better term, he received a pass. Now you have a situation where the United States attorney has all this information that they've learned over the course of the some 6 to 8 years that has passed since Jeffrey Epstein's case in Florida. They thought they had enough information to go forward with it. And so now the question is, who else are they going to bring in? Obviously, it would have been an easier case to charge other people if Jeffrey Epstein was alive and if Jeffrey Epstein would proffer to the United States attorney and the FBI, be able to cut a deal with them, and in exchange for that leniency, he would be given a reduced sentence. It still would be a lengthy sentence, but it would probably would have been a sentence that would have resulted him, dying in prison. He's 63 years old, I think, right now, 65 years old. I mean, let's face it, anything more than a couple of years, he probably would not have been able to do, and here we are. But it clearly shows consciousness of guilt. It shows he didn't want to go forward, basically probably realizing that this was not a good situation that he was going to get out of at all. But I would have loved to have seen him proffer or see what he said and see if he dropped any names as it related to whom his associates were, friends, or whomever that did that. I mean, there's so much information. I was reading a story just the other day that Jeffrey Epstein's pilot was being subpoenaed and brought into court regarding question about who was on the plane, his Lolita Express that he flew for Mr. Epstein, apparently, who was kind of his pilot over the last several decades, and probably saw a lot of people and probably saw lots of things that if only he would talk as well. My guess is, for the most part, that since Mr. Epstein is now gone, that this case will, for lack of a better term, also be gone, and more than likely, unless there's some sort of eyewitness, the assistant that Mr. Epstein had that would actually be able to identify and say, yes, I did this for these people, but then they have to bring in the person that engaged in any sort of sexual conduct with these people, and a lot of those people simply don't want to be involved with that for lots of reasons. I mean, think about it. If someone was involved in sex trafficking as a child, do you really want to get up in front of a jury of strangers in an open courtroom where people can see your name and put it out there and say, oh, by the way, I did this, this, and this? For the most part, that's not going to happen. And that is a factor that prosecutors have to take into consideration on just about any type of case involving children, even if it was later, even if time has gone by and they're no longer children. It is really it's a tragedy in the sense that you have to put people back on the witness stand to articulate what took place, what happened. But our Constitution requires, and there's not a whole lot of getting around it in any way, it requires cross-examination. You have a right to confront and cross-examine your accusers. All unite. Question we had: the civil suits can still move forward under his estate. Yes. So Jeffrey Epstein was being sued by individuals stating that they were the victims of his acts. Now the question is going to be, can the estate be held responsible for any of this conduct that he's alleged to have engaged in, if in fact it is found to be true. Yes, those attorneys that are suing Mr. Epstein or were suing him as an individual will now have to go and make a claim against his estate. And I'm not going to say I know the specifics of New York probate law, but generally somebody can sue an estate if those particular claims can continue on past one's death. The estate may or may not have any benefit to settle the matters and simply be done with it, but it's simply a case where maybe the state says, fine, fight it. I think he was estimated to be worth some roughly $500 million. I assure you there's going to be a couple of attorneys that are going to go out there and try to make a case to try and get a piece of that. And then the people that are going to defend Epstein's case are going to be billing the heck out of it. And by the time those bills get paid, there'll be unlikely that there'll be a whole lot of money left over for anybody else. Doreen Saylor, yes, he was no longer on suicide watch. That's correct. He had been cleared. And, and people, like I said, I don't want to sound like I'm an expert. I've had clients on suicide watch before. I've gone to see them when they've been on suicide watch. Normally, when somebody goes into a facility, the first 24 to 48 hours, they're usually held in some sort of suicide watch because that's when suddenly the realization hits people that they are possibly going to prison for an extended period of time, if not their lifetime. When they're in suicide watch, literally there's little to nothing in their cell. They're given the kind of this long, I've seen it as green suits that Velcro, so there's nothing there that they could use to harm themselves. And they are ultimately, for lack of a better term, naked. Excuse me. And, but they're not going to be on suicide watch forever. And you cannot watch anyone 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. At some point, there's going to be something that takes place. It could have been, his first suicide attempt. They probably should have been a little safer. Who knows what actually happened? Who knows if Epstein convinced one of the guards, the correctional officers, to turn away, turn the switch off? Who knows? Prison and jail is a world in and of itself. It has its own set of rules. There are things that the security officers will allow the inmates to get away with to kind of take care of things. We've talked about this before. When one is accused of a sexual offense, there's a hierarchy in the prison system. And people that abuse children, people who sexually assault children, and people who rape women are on the bottom of that list. They are the lowest of the low, and they will have a miserable existence there. Epstein may have already experienced some of that. If he's out in kind of a general population, people will want to, they'll be giving him a hard time. When he goes to the food line, who knows what they've done to his food? Who knows what threats are being made to him? He may have just said, hey, this is too scary for me. And let's face it, he wasn't going to probably get out. When he was denied bond at his bond detention hearing, let's face it, he knew the end was near and that he was going to spend the rest of his life in prison. We'll never know for sure, unless, of course, there was some sort of a suicide note. There's been no indication that anything like that exists or that he wrote one. And, we'll just simply have to wait and see at this point. I would have loved, as an attorney, to have seen the trial go forward, to see the witnesses that they would have called in the sense to prove their case. I would have loved to have seen the people that were associating with him, that he apparently helped them engage in these alleged sexual acts with underage people or children. That would have been very interesting. Like I said, there were some 2,000 pages, that was released yesterday, had some very influential people's names on it, and it really makes you wonder why. Now, let's be fair. Just because somebody knows the man, maybe they've known him forever, doesn't necessarily mean that they engaged in something wrong. Okay? That is, people are given the presumption of innocence. That's what separates us from a lot of countries in the world. You don't have to prove yourself innocent. They have to prove you guilty. So just because somebody knew Jeffrey Epstein doesn't mean that they were engaging in anything illegal. Just because Jeffrey Epstein knew them or donated them doesn't mean that they were some sort of way involved with anything illegal with children. It doesn't mean that at all. But it makes you wonder, people's judgment as to why they were associated with him. We're not talking about somebody like, oh, I got in trouble because, I made a mistake when I was younger. We're talking about somebody who was obviously much older in life, who engaged in this, and it would appear that he continued to engage in this conduct even after he was caught and sentenced to jail, even though he had a pretty cush life when he was in custody. When you are referring to Jeffrey Epstein's first case, he was basically given work release where he was allowed to go to work, up to, I think, 11 to 12 hours per day. The sheriffs there were basically giving him better treatment than anybody else. Why? Because he had money and resources. And apparently things were done that way. And that's the way the sheriff was running his jail. One of the fundamental principles of our American judicial system, and that's why if you look at the Lady Justice holding her scales, is that she's blind, and that everyone is supposed to be treated equally, whether you're an absolute pauper and have no money, or whether you are the richest or one of the richest people in the world. Lady Justice says, I don't really care about that. We're not here to judge whether you're a good person or you're a bad person. We're here to judge whether a certain event as alleged took place and punish you based upon that certain offense. Sometimes there's mitigating circumstances, things that would reduce the punishment. Sometimes there's aggravating circumstances. It just depends. But Lady Justice is supposed to be blind. All right, so let's take a look here at some of the questions going by. What questions would you all like to answer, whether it's related to Jeffrey Epstein and his suicide that was revealed this morning, or whether it's anything else related to CrimeTalk? And obviously, we were off last week. I had to go to a conference, and time schedules just simply did not permit us to put up any content last week. The question is, what would you all like to see? I mean, we started this channel, and it was because we wanted to provide a little more in-depth analysis as it relates to what you're going to see in the evening news. We hope we've done that. We talked about the Chris Watts case. We talked about the Chris Watts case extensively. And some people love it, some people don't. It just depends. We've talked about other cases that have gone on that are high profile, but obviously, as you all have seen, even if somebody's accused of a crime, let alone charged, it doesn't just happen within a quick time frame of a few weeks or even a month or so. Most of these serious cases from beginning to end usually take at least a year or so, if not more, to try to get to the point of resolution. Oh, here's a question. Dead Reckoning. Do you think OJ is guilty? Boy, what a way to offend or ingratiate more people. The OJ Simpson trial, I can tell you, I watched or listened to most of the OJ Simpson trial. Why? Because I was in law school at the time. I remember I would leave work and I had evening classes at the time, and I would listen through it kind of throughout the day. I would listen through it throughout the on my way to school, and that was literally a 1-week trial that wound up taking almost a year. Nowhere else in the world would that trial have taken that long. Nowhere else in the world would that case have had so many sideshows and circuses, but for that weak judge. Do I think O.J. Simpson did it? Yes, I do. Do I think because of the circus that was allowed to be put on and the sideshow allowed to be put on completely screw up the case? Yes. Do I think that the prosecutors that they put on that case were probably some of the worst and most incompetent? Yes. But I totally believe the judge allowed that to get away. And had he literally kept that the egos in that case under control, that trial would have taken a week, maybe a week and a half at the most, and OJ would have been found guilty. I personally believe that he did it. I also think it's absolute karma and probably a feeling of invincibility on OJ, that when he was arrested and ultimately sent to prison in Nevada, that he thought he could get away with it. He's the juice. The juice is loose, right? And he thought he could get away with it. Well, lightning didn't strike twice, and he wound up serving a sentence, I think, of 8 years ultimately in that case. But he probably should have got more time. Yes, there's little to no doubt in my mind that that's actually what took place, that OJ, in fact, was guilty. But his attorneys allowed that circus to take place. And if you want to blame one person for that, obviously OJ, he did it, but he didn't get up and testify. His attorneys created a reasonable doubt. It was the judge that allowed that circus to take place. That thing literally, like I said, most homicide trials don't take more than a week once you seat a jury. I mean, that took almost a year. That's crazy, 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 crazy. All right. Let's see. Any more questions here? Let me just take a quick look here. Okay, we got almost. All right. So let's reset here again. All right. For those who have just joined us, my name is Scott Reisch, and this is CrimeTalk. And we hope that you will like our channel, subscribe, like the video. This will be put back up for those who want to watch it later as well. And then we also ask you, if you'd like to, go to scottreisch.com, and there you can sign up for our weekly newsletter that we send out. And I think we sent out the 5 mugs that we sent out last week for the first 5 that had signed up. And we've done this before, where if people, send, we usually give a number, said, hey, the first 5, you'll get a CrimeTalk mug. And we've had people, and the only thing that we ask is, once you get your mug, send us a picture of you, drinking your favorite beverage out of the CrimeTalk mug. and we'll put up your mug shot, and we'll do it, and we will. So we appreciate that. So go to scottreisch.com if you haven't already done so. Sign up for the newsletter. We'll make sure we get it out. In fact, let me ask our producer, editor, man of many skills, do we still have some more mugs?
We do.
Do we have at least 5 more? Okay, so I think we have at least 5 more mugs. So the first 5 people that go to scottreisch.com and sign up for our email that have not previously signed up already, simply state that I'm signing up and I would like my free Crime Talk mug with your address and contact information so that we can get it to you, complete address and phone number, preferably. And we will send to you, at no charge to you, a free Crime Talk mug. And in case you were wondering what the free Crime Talk mug would look like, here it is. It's got our little Crime Talk symbol there and the let's talk about it as well. So appreciate if you do that. All right. Let's see here. Are there any particular trends that people are talking about this morning other than Epstein?
There's a few updates on the Doulos case. Still no body.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Jennifer Doulos case. And this is the same thing that I have mentioned as it relates to the Patrick Frazee case here in Colorado, where Kelsey Barrett is the victim. And in that particular case, the district attorney charged the case without a body. They have a nurse, Nurse Lee, who was apparently some sort of in a romantic relationship with Patrick Frazee. He apparently had asked Nurse Lee on several occasions to kill Kelsey Barrett. She apparently went to the apartment on some 3 occasions and said that she was going to do it, but then chickened out. But ultimately, Patrick Frazee, according to Nurse Lee, killed her, and then she drove all the way from Idaho to clean up the crime scene, but left a few items of evidentiary value there so as to prove that there was in fact a homicide. But Nurse Lee received an F6 felony offer, which leaves her potentially exposed to 12 months to 18 months in prison here in Colorado and up to 3 years in the aggravated range. But she could get probation, basically depending on how well she cooperates. But in that particular case, they've never found a body. And there's been no indication to date whether they found DNA evidence on the ranch where Nurse Lee says that the body was burned. Nothing there. Patrick Frazee's made no particular statements. Okay? But you have a district attorney that went and charged it. Why? I think he was feeling a lot of pressure. He probably thought, well, we have an accomplice that's going to back this up. But there is an instruction that they can give in Colorado. It says if there's no other corroborating evidence other than just what the accomplice is testifying to, that basically says you should take that testimony with a huge grain of salt, be leery of it, because that's basically, one person saying the other person did it, but there's nothing else to corroborate it. Why? That is why district attorneys love corroborating evidence. If somebody says they did A, B, and C on a particular day, they like to be able to show that they did that. And if they can't show that, it hurts their case because people want that corroboration. Because let's face it, a lot of people, even if they're corroborating witnesses, are not necessarily that trustworthy. They are already getting some benefit of the bargain for telling their story. What is the easiest way, we've said this before, to get somebody else in trouble? Well, it could be Nurse Lee, who says, oh, this is what happened. It was terrible. He told me all about it. But in fact, she was the one that was there. She was the one that did it. So the easiest way to do that, use the same story and simply just change the name or the time frame of how that was done. Thank you, Nina, for that super chat. Appreciate it. I thank you. We do try to put out interesting content for you all every day. We try to make it a better quality every time that we put it out. So I appreciate you tuning in. Like I said, this channel could not have grown the way it has in the last year without you all being willing to tune in, to like it, to tell other people that you like our content, that we are a fact-driven channel. We're trying to give you the facts. We're not going to sit here and speculate all day long. Now, if I'm telling you this is my opinion, I'm going to tell you it's my opinion based upon the facts or where I think it's going to go. But that's based on some 25 years of being a criminal defense attorney, not somebody just simply sitting here speculating about what could possibly be. Okay? I am a realist. You have to be able to prove it. Just like in court, I can go in there and make all sorts of outlandish statements to a jury, but if I can't back it up with evidence and facts, people are going to question my credibility. People are going to say, we can't believe a word that comes out of that guy's mouth. So that's why we try to always have the facts, and we like to have the facts correct. And we also like to be able to provide some analysis upon that. But we're telling you what's our analysis and what we think is going to happen. We're not telling that those are facts. And I think that's where a lot of people get confused is, facts is something I can actually go and say, look, there it is. It's not in dispute. You can't say, oh, look, that's the mountaintop over there, and say, look, you don't see it. Well, if you don't believe it, if you don't see the mountain, you must be crazy. You're just you're a denier. No, because there's no mountain over there. And let's look from where I'm sitting to the east. There are no mountains. So those are the kind of things that we really try to focus on, is the facts. Okay, just like in the Jennifer Dulos case compared to the Patrick Frazee case, Frodo's Dulos may be the worst husband ever. He may be a terrible father. He probably, and there's not a whole lot of doubt, that he had a mistress. The mistress has been charged with this evidence tampering, just as he has. She has gone in and talked to the police. They haven't said exactly what she has said, but guess what? They haven't dropped the charges against her, but guess what? They haven't added any more charges against Frodo Dulos or his mistress because of what she has said. The reality of it in that particular case is there is no body. Without a body, it is so very difficult to prove a homicide case. Not impossible, but it makes it more difficult. And so the Patrick Frazee case, the trial is coming up here in October, if my memory serves me correct. And it's going to be interesting how they get around proving the death of Kelsey Barrett. Yes, she is not here, but that doesn't mean that people literally say one day, oh, I'm leaving, I'm on my way. We, like I said, we don't like to think that people would do that. She had a young child. It's probably very unlikely that she did that, but it doesn't remove it from the realm of reasonable possibility. I'm going to mispronounce that name, but thank you for the super chat. Indistirin? Did I pronounce that correctly? Hope I got that, but I appreciate that super chat as well. And so in that Patrick Frazee case, there is no body. It's going to be interesting to see how the prosecutor gets around. Do they have Nurse Lee say, I saw the body, I helped burn the body? Okay, what evidence do they have that, in fact, that is actually the case? Let's see. Do you feel bad putting that client? Okay, I get this question all the time, but we'll answer it for Penny Sue. As a criminal defense attorney, if you have a client you know in your heart is absolutely guilty, do you feel bad putting that client back on the street, or is it just a game? Well, first of all, it's not a game, Penny Sue. It's the law. And the law is a very serious thing. And in most cases, we're talking about somebody's liberty, which is their freedom is at stake. Okay. And if somebody is charged with something, accused of making that allegation, our fundamental principle in the law is that the accuser has to prove what they're saying. If you're a defendant, how do you disprove a negative? If somebody says, hey, Peggy Sue, you did terrible things to your children that live next door to you, and you say, that's crazy, I didn't do that, and the person says, oh, you did it, how are you going to, prove you didn't? Well, it didn't happen. So how do you prove that it didn't happen? Let's say maybe you were at the house, maybe you had access to the children. How do you disprove that? Well, our system of government says that's not the way it works. You have to have the people making the allegations, in this case, the state, the federal government or a municipality, prove those charges beyond a reasonable doubt. How do you prove those? By bringing in evidence, which is subject to cross-examination, which is the greatest truth-seeking tool ever created. That is how the process works. And it has to be not only proven just to a judge appointed by the state, but to 12 jury members in the community on felony matters, not so much on misdemeanor matters. So do I feel bad if somebody I know is guilty that probably did it and they didn't get off and they got off? Do I feel bad? And let's say they go out there and maybe even do something worse. As a defense attorney, I've made sure the process works. Okay. We simply said, fine, government, even if my client is absolutely guilty. And that's the beautiful thing about our system, even if somebody is absolutely guilty. And I've had clients, the crime has been on video and they see it, like it's right there. And I tell my client, I'm like, dude, that's you. And he says, that's not me. That's not me. And I'm like, I'm your attorney. I don't want it to be you, okay? But I'm telling you, that's you, and a reasonable jury is going to believe that's you. That client still has an absolute right to say, prove it, take it to trial, okay? And if the prosecutor can't get that evidence in and the ID is bad and the guy walks, whose fault is that? Maybe it's the district attorney that's incompetent, that couldn't lay the proper foundation under the rules of evidence. Is it my fault for knowing the rules? No, it's the governor's or it's the government's fault for not being able to do that. So do I feel bad? No. Every now and then, maybe I need to go take a hot, shower with a wire brush to get myself clean. Yes, but ultimately, the district attorney is the one that should be blamed for that. If that was the case. The reality of it is, though, a lot of times what is charged is not what people are guilty of. Okay. There's lesser included charges. Oftentimes you go to a district attorney and say, hey, you charged burglary. When in reality, it's simply a criminal trespass charge. And, which is a much lower penalty. And then you argue over why that's there. Is that part of the game? No, that's part of the process. It's part of the truth. And I will tell you, there's a quote out there that says the American judicial system is absolutely terrible, but it is better than anywhere else in the world. And I totally agree with that. Okay. It is the best system in the world. Where else do you have right to counsel to protect your constitutional rights? And that's the other thing that just irritates me when people ask me, do you feel bad if somebody gets off because of a technicality? Ladies and gentlemen, the Constitution is not a technicality. Penny Sue. So it is a game and you don't feel bad, sad because I like you, but I'm a victim advocate. I love victim advocates. Everybody's doing their job. But like I said, the Constitution is not a technicality. They're fundamental constitutional rights. And yes, even if you know the person did it, even if you know they're guilty, you still have to do it, okay? I have a situation right now where I had an employee engage in illegal conduct and stole things of value from me. I know he did it. Everybody knows he did it. He confessed, okay? He's being prosecuted. But I still have to go through the process. And I completely understand that. Is it frustrating? Yes. But the due process is more important than just basically doing anything because we think that somebody is guilty. I know he's guilty. I know he did it. Everybody knows he did it. But we'll go through the process. It may take time, but that process is important. We don't skirt the rules just to get the result that we want. If that's what you want, you can go to China, go to Venezuela, go to Cuba, and you can get the exact same result. But no, it's not a game. It is very serious things that take place in a courtroom. We're talking about people's lives, their futures, the future of their family, their kids. It matters. So no, it's not a game. It's a very, very important process. And some people are better at the process than others. So we'll just leave it at that. And I love police officers. I love detectives. I love district attorneys. Most of them are good people. Only a few, like most occupations. There's always, most of them are very good people, and then you have the few bad eggs, but they never get rid of the few bad eggs. And that's the way it is. Chef Betsy, thank you for that super chat for stating that we bring reason, education, and sanity, and keeping it balanced in check. That is what we try to do. All right. Let's see here. Wow, time goes by fast. Time goes by so fast. Let's see here. All right. Yeah, let's see. All right, so yeah, Diane, thank you. I mean, not that I need defending. I can take care of myself, but I appreciate that. I mean, part of the job as a criminal defense attorney, and people just don't really understand that, is, we're the people that have to, for lack of a better term, ask the elephant in the room questions, the questions that people want asked, the answers that people are looking for, that sometimes nobody else can, in fact, get those answers to. But we, as criminal defense attorneys, still have to do it compassionately to the witnesses, because why? We have an audience that we have to maintain credibility for in front of, and that's the jury. We don't get to go up there and start saying, you're a liar, you're this, you're that. It doesn't work that way. And I think some people think that that's the way it happens. In fact, some of the most effective cross-examinations I think I've ever done, and the question has been whether this person is being truthful or not. And let me assure you, people, just because somebody goes to court, and they don't even use Bibles in most courtrooms anymore, but I think I mentioned it down in South Carolina. They actually swore people in. It was U.S. District Court in Charleston. They swore people in actually on a Bible. I haven't seen a Bible in probably 20 plus years in any courtroom. I don't think I've ever seen one in the state court. And they swore upon the Bible, but people still get up there and do not tell the truth. Now, are they lying? Some of them are. Yeah, they lie. Other people, that's what they believed they saw. That's what they believe they possibly heard. It doesn't mean that they're lying. It just means that's what they believe they saw, what they remember. Okay? It's for the jury to decide what evidence to believe. The jury instructions say you can believe some, part, or none of the evidence from a particular witness, okay? And I've seen that where people are like, I believe the witness, everything they said up until this point, and then I didn't believe a single word of it. Okay. Now, is that the defense attorney that's doing that? I don't know. Like I said, some of the best cross-examination, most effective that I've ever done. I've never accused anybody of doing anything inappropriate. Okay. I've simply said they were mistaken. Okay. And then they dig their heels in and they refuse to acknowledge that they could possibly be mistaken because they don't want to, people to think that they're wrong, that they made an allegation and it's not possible for that to have taken place. And I've never had to say anything other than they were mistaken. And the jury says, yeah, the facts just don't line up to that particular witness's version of the events. So we're not going to listen to what he or she has to say. Is that a game? No. I like to think it's more of a truth-seeking process that we go through. And yes, is this system flawed? Yes. Will innocent people be convicted? Yes. Okay. It's happened. I mean, look at all the people that have been freed through the Innocent Project, where they've served life, sentenced to death, and they've ultimately been found guilty. So I always find it somewhat ironic where the defense attorney is always seen as the bad guys. How can you live with the fact that you get somebody off of a charge or a case, and what if they're guilty? How come no one ever asks the district attorneys, how do you feel about someone being wrongfully convicted? Okay. Why doesn't somebody ask that question to district attorneys? I think that's very relevant. Why? Because my job is to protect the Constitution. My job is to protect the process. The district attorney's job is supposedly to do justice, not just get convictions. All right. And so when people ask and say, oh, is this a game? Well, go ask the district attorneys, is this just a game? Okay. Because their job is justice, not just to get a conviction. And if they're not doing that, why isn't anybody calling them out? Why isn't anybody holding someone else out to ask them, how can you be a part of a system that's flawed? How can you be a part of a system or an office that has sent innocent people to jail? District attorneys say, well, the jury found him guilty. Well, but your office withheld evidence. So anyway, it's just, I don't know. There's so many things out there that, it can be done either way. And yes, on the Kessinger super chat that just went by, sorry about that. Let me see if I can see that. That is not over yet. More to come. We'll just leave it at that. And which is also kind of interesting as it relates to, the Watts case. We put out information, analysis basically of some people's theories out there and why it wouldn't be done. I've been accused of some of the most crazy things. I've been accused of being retained by the Kessinger family. I've been accused of being a part of a bigger conspiracy by the government not to do that because of shadow groups and organizations. Who knows what? I mean, some of the things, they were just so crazy and so ridiculous. I had people saying that I liked your channel. I'm unsubscribing because, you don't see what I see in the video, and therefore, you are just a horrible person and wished terrible things upon me and my family. That is, frankly, a little shocking to me. I mean, I've received death threats over clients that I've represented. I've seen protests outside of courtrooms on cases that I've had. But no one has ever really gone as nasty as some of the people do on the internet. And maybe it's just because of the anonymity that exists on the internet, where people think that they can get basically that their identities will never be found. But let's face it, people, if it's on a computer, if it's on a phone, what have I said in the past? You can hack it and you can track it. Your identity is not completely shrouded in secrecy, and sometimes some of these people need to be called out. Maybe I should have saved some of those and I could have put them up and said, here's so-and-so who says this, here's so-and-so who says that. And, at least if you're going to do it, have enough guts to say it to my face, for goodness sakes. It's not like you can't get a hold of me. Heck, you can go to scottreisch.com and you can email it to me. Doesn't take a whole lot. You could actually even find my office if you wanted to. Come see me if you're in town. All right. It's just crazy. Okay. Quick comment on the El Paso shooter. The El Paso shooter case is, everyone gets tired of hearing, people say, oh, it's a tragedy. Okay. It's tragic that innocent people lost their lives, but this was nothing more than a cold-blooded murder. Okay. This guy drives from his house from the Dallas-Fort Worth area down to El Paso. I was literally in El Paso 2 weeks ago because I was doing a sentencing on a federal case in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And it is, it's just shocking to me that somebody would go in and think, I want to go kill people for some ridiculous reason, whether it's political or it's hate. It doesn't matter. You can have, okay, we're going to say, oh, this murder is really, really bad because it was a hate crime. No, murder is wrong. Okay. And this guy went down there and he killed innocent women, children, and men just because they happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Okay. That's not a tragedy. That's murder. It's tragic that they had to be killed. It's ridiculous that that they were killed. They didn't have to be, but he is going to be tried and going to be promptly convicted of murder. His defense attorneys are going to have a very, very difficult time. Their only goal will be to save him from the death penalty. And whether it's prosecuted both in the state and the federal system, very similar to the case in South Carolina. I can't think of the kid's name where he went in and shot up the church. He was prosecuted both state and federal, usually for state for the murder, and then the hate crimes in the federal system. And the kid in El Paso that went and did this, he's 21 years old. What does he know about life? What does he know about anything where he thinks that he has the knowledge, so to speak, that he needs to go kill people because he thinks America is being invaded? For the love of, are you kidding me? It's so stupid that this kid did it. And frankly, whether he rots to death in a prison cell or he is killed by the state or federal government, whatever happens to him is going to be determined by a jury, and justice will prevail. He's not getting off. There's nothing they can do. The only thing they do is probably try to save his life. And that's through the death penalty. And then you have the other guy in, Dayton, Ohio, who asks his sister for a ride to go shoot up a popular bar district. Once again, apparently for no particular reason whatsoever, other than to kill everybody, and kills his own sister in the process. I think there was talk that the guy has mental illness or whatever. Guess what? Doesn't matter. He killed those people, and it was senseless. It was no justification whatsoever for it. And I know a lot of people are now up in arms about guns and things of that nature. But guess what, people? There's already background checks. Every one of those weapons was obtained legally. Do you think if they really wanted to go shoot something up, they would have said, "Ooh, I can't get that gun because I can't do it illegally because I can't get a background check." No, they would have done it that way, or they would have gone somebody else. Okay, and just like our judicial system is based upon the premise that the government has to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, it's also part of our fundamental legal system here, in that we as individuals have individual liberties, and that our liberties are not going to be infringed upon because of the acts of another. Why should anybody's out there free speech rights be infringed by the government based upon what somebody else said? Why should my right to privacy in my home be infringed upon based upon what somebody else's conduct was? Why should my individual rights to bear arms be infringed upon because someone else engaged in conduct that is illegal? They should be punished and punished accordingly. But if I've done nothing wrong, why should my rights be infringed? That's the fundamental question. Okay. And most people will say, if it would save just one life, wouldn't it be worth it? No, it wouldn't be. Okay. My individual rights and your individual rights are more important to you than to the big picture of everyone else. If you want to voluntarily do something because you think it's going to change the system, change whatever, then you're welcome to do it. But I shouldn't have to do it, and I shouldn't be forced to do it. That's the fundamental system of our country that it was built upon. We don't go and say, oh, this knucklehead from Dallas went and killed all these people. Are we going to go to everybody in this block and arrest them and charge them and say, why didn't you know what was going on? We're going to charge you. In fact, better yet, we'll just line everybody up on the block and, do something terrible to them. No, we don't do that. Okay. Our system of justice is based upon you punish the wrongdoer and not anybody else. Okay. That's what the king would do. That's what despot dictators do. Oh, we don't like what somebody did from a particular town or village. Let's go in and annihilate the whole village. That'll show everybody else. That's not what we do in America. That's not the way our system is set up. So that's it for today. I appreciate you tuning in. We will be back this week with regular Crime Talk. Like I said, I apologize. I was out of town for a conference, and it just didn't turn out the way I hoped it would time-wise. And I always am the eternal optimist, thinking that I'll be able to get everything done. It'll all happen. Unfortunately, something always has to give. So we're going to be back at it this week. Let us know. Leave us a message. Leave us a go to scottreisch.com. Send us an email. What do you want us to talk about? Some of our best topics that we've had thus far on Crime Talk have been suggestions from our Crime Talk listeners. And so, there's only so many hours in a day. I can't look at everything on my own. We try to. We try to do everything that we can to make sure that we're being informed and getting the facts right. And some stuff we're not going to talk about unless and until we know we have the facts right. And like I said, we don't always have to agree. Sometimes we have to agree to disagree, but we can do it respectfully, and we don't have to call each other names to do so. I think that is one of the things I do love about being a lawyer is that in courtroom, one side talks, they don't get interrupted. The other side talks, they don't get interrupted. The judge will ask a question, they'll respond, but at a certain point, it's over. But everybody still treats each other with respect. It's not like you see on TV where people are shouting over everybody. And guess what? If you can't do anything else other than call people names, that usually means you have lost the argument. And not that we're looking to argue with anybody, but it's just something to think about. It's something I've learned over the years. If all you can say is your opponent is, call them nasty things, and you can't provide specific facts to support your argument, that means your argument's probably not that strong. We try to stick with facts. We're not going to call anybody names. So I appreciate that. Have a great day. Thanks for watching this live edition of CrimeTalk, and we will be back next week and possibly even go live as well. So thank you. Leave a comment, subscribe. Have a great day.